Hello, everyone. What's up? My name is Chris, and I'm very, very excited to be here. Ioana,
Hey folks, I'm Ioana. I don't know if I can match Chris's energy, but welcome aboard Human in the Loop, your compass to the shifting tides of AI.
fab. And I think in this podcast, we're really excited. We're going to be unpacking a ton of stuff to do with trustworthy AI and untrustworthy AI, so the bad stuff as well, why it matters, and how it shapes the products we're delivering and building, right? And it's really important for us and our customers and actually anyone that's touching AI to know this stuff. We'll be talking about actual ways we practice innovation, how we drive innovation in a responsible, containerized manner, but also how we can inform all of you who are watching this, listening to this, or whatever it is you're doing with this, how you can kind of learn and get information. So, Ioana, what's on the agenda today? What have we got planned?
I think it's enough about us. I'm really, really excited to introduce our speaker today. Altrese, do you want to say hello
Yes,
and
of
share who
course.
you are?
So, thank you so much for having me. I am extremely excited to be here. My name is Altrese Hawkins-Gopie. I lead responsible AI in the spaces of compliance, governance, and operations at Microsoft. Essentially, I sit at the intersection of policy and operations, helping translate the complex responsible AI principles into practical systems that actually work at scale. I'm a value driven individual and the founder of the Authentic Empowerment Hub, where I lead the Empower AI initiative, where my mission is really to make AI literacy and responsible AI concepts accessible to everyone from tech professionals, educators, parents, students, small business owners, enterprise, everyone. I also am a board member at the American Access Institute, and this is a national nonprofit where we leverage AI to expand access and opportunity for youth that is facing adversity.
I absolutely love, 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 love that. And I think I want to come back to you in a second, but teachable moment, Chris, putting you on the spot. I'm going to have this question for all of us, so I'm giving myself homework as well. But I think we should define what is responsible AI. All of us will have such a different view of what responsible AI is. So, Chris,
I'm
fire
gonna,
drill,
I'm,
what is
yeah,
responsible
yeah.
AI for you?
All right, I'm gonna use some colorful analogies here. I hope that's okay. But responsible AI is effectively the ethical use of AI-driven technologies for good, right? And it's not abusing what artificial intelligence gives us. Now, I think there's a big difference between, you know, using tech for ethical and responsible use and using tech just for using tech, right? And the example I'll give you is I always say we as humans have this thing where we turn walking sticks into weapons, right? Like we find something really cool that's there to help, that's there to drive innovation, and then we do awful things with it, right? And that is the kind of core definition for me of responsible AI is not allowing that to happen. And I don't think it's just about the tech, it's also about like a societal thing. So, as a responsible AI citizen, an example, something that I wouldn't do would be generating 100 pointless images with AI because it eats up resourcing, right? Just as a random example. It gets more deep than that, but it's more thinking about the impact that your use of AI will have on your ecosystem around you, and that it is your responsibility to make sure that it is not negative. So that to me is the core message of responsible AI, making sure your use of AI, whether it be building, whether it be using, has not got a negative effect on your wider ecosystem.
I love that. And I love the example of just because you have access to that technology doesn't mean you have to use that technology. Do you understand the bill? And I'm using air quotes when I'm saying that, that comes with it. Altrice, do you want to go next? What is responsible
Yeah,
AI for you?
so responsible AI is such a broad topic, and I know that there are multiple different definitions that different people have. But ultimately, when you think about responsible AI, it is making products and solutions that are like safe, ethical, trustworthy for everyone. And one analogy that I really like to use is, and so my husband, he works for the National Football League, and so I always have to translate things into football terms as I talk to him. And so the way that I explained it is that imagine there's a football team and they're creating an AI system for all sports. And so they're supposed to do like, maybe some film rating system that they have. And so a football team is not going to necessarily create a system that is inclusive of badminton or pickleball or tennis because people only know what they know and football players know football. and that is it. And responsible AI is really the same exact thing. And so when people are building, using, and implementing these systems, we need to be really thinking and bringing everybody into the loop to really help make things responsible and inclusive of everyone. And I would also say, from a responsible AI perspective, is like you don't need to be a data scientist to understand responsible AI. I have a science background, and so you need to be able to care about how the decisions that these systems make and who they're impacting. That would be my definition of responsible AI. And if I just translate it a little bit further into practice, it's thinking about who could this harm? Who might be excluded?
Mm-hmm.
Are we being transparent with how data goes in and data goes out of this system? Like those are some of the things that people really need to critically think in responsible AI.
Love that. I
I
love
was
that.
nodding so much at that, and I think mine picks up on both of yours, and ultimately boils down to, and it's oversimplifying, but for me, really responsible AI makes or breaks technology in the sense of, if your system is responsible, chances are you're going to have a pretty good system, and if your system is not responsible, there chances are it's going to fail. And I think we're continuing to see every day news articles about, like, this chatbot over here did this, and this information over here, gave away user permissions and things like that. So we are flooded by the examples of when those principles are not put into practice, you can see the consequences. And going back to your point, Altrese, of how does it represent humans, and how does pickleball play a part? How does softball play a part, and so forth? I work a lot on the intersection of AI and disability. So things that we look at is, how are people with disabilities represented in AI systems? And we have such a long way to go in terms of correct representation. I'll give you one of the examples that in the early days of the text-to-image models, when somebody was trying to create a photo of themselves, if they had dwarfism and said, hey, create a photo of me with dwarfism, it created magical characters. It created leprechauns. It created elves. It created anything but the actual humans that have dwarfism. So that question of, does it really represent and work for everybody? I think it's critical, because otherwise, also from a consumer perspective, you lose credibility, right? If people don't see themselves represented in the systems, they're not likely to use them. The pickleball associate might say, nah, I'm not going to use your system. This is not for us. You actually have no clue what we do. So going back to that community perspective, and to the points you were sharing about how you're working with communities, I know that the community education holistically is super important to you, and that you work a lot with people who are outside of the tech space. Can you tell us more about that? How are you seeing kind of that connection between, we're the choir, but how are you seeing the people who are not necessarily always part of the choir?
And typically, most people just don't know. And it's very hard for me because I know, Kristen, we had a pre-meeting before this, and we were talking about how we're nerds, and like, I love the tech, I love the technical part of it. And it's always been difficult for me to say, okay, hey, I need to up level this and I need to simplify it, even though like my skin itches to go technical, I would lose the whole community in itself. Ultimately, so many people like don't even know that AI has been around for years and years. They don't understand that AI is in Siri, AI is in Amazon Alexa, AI is in Maps and Waze and like all of these different things. And so like fundamentally bringing the community along the journey to first like let them know like, hey, you're already using AI. Like, did you realize that? And like,
Yes.
here are some different ways that you're using it. These are different models. They might be predictive, they might be machine learning, it might be optical character recognition, and like giving the highest level of what those things are, but then letting them know, hey, my 8-year-old has learned how to prompt. Hey, if an 8-year-old can do this, I can guarantee that you can do it too. And like I told a group that I had spoken to a couple of months back, my 8-year-old is very, I can do it by myself type of child. And so when I was trying to explain to her how to prompt to do text to image, she refused any of my help. Like she was like, no, I can do it. And she literally sat there and prompted in her 8 year old language and created a whole entire image of what I had asked her to create. And then she would realize that she didn't like it, and then she would tweak it, and then she would put something else in there. And like that really helps bring it home to the community, especially like my mom and people in her age group that are in their 70s and their 80s, that they're just like, oh no, this is tech, I'm not going to touch it. But it's really making it practical for people and making them understand that, like, hey, you can do this. And it's critical for all of us to use it, to build it, to implement it in our day-to-day lives.
So I have two 8-year-olds, so they're twins, polar opposite, by the way, like literally polar opposite, and then a 10-year-old. And it's the no daddy, I can do it myself vibes. And I'm like, dudes, have you tried this version of prompting? And they're like, no, and they use their imagination. And actually, something I learned, right, is that I kind of have to let them just do it because I've kind of locked into a very like distilled way of thinking. And actually, something else really interesting happened, and I just come up to mind. I was working with an extremely large governmental organization, and we were building an AI agent for them, and they had an intern that I was working with, and this guy was about 19, 20 years old, right? And absolute legend. So I'm like building my agent and doing my thing, and I'm all, hey, this is how it works, yap, 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 yap. And the things he came up with on like for my out the box thinking, I like to think I'm a pretty out the box thinker, right? I think that I think very esoterically, if that makes sense. Like I'm very happy to think outside of everything and bring things together. This kid basically said to me, he's like, oh, have you tried this? And he showed me this whole new style of prompting and a whole new style of instruction sets. And I was like, whoa, hold up. So I took that info and I shared it with my community because I'm like, my 8-year-olds are doing this 20-year-old is doing this. Why is it we are not thinking about like this? And it's because we're distilled into this very like logical way of thinking. And it blew my mind. So Altrese, exactly what you're saying. Like my version of what AI is different to what my predecessor's version will be and the people coming up will be. And I think that's really important, right? So responsible AI is going to be different as well for the variance. I don't think that our kids and our kids' will see responsible AI in the way we do because we're at an intersection of don't do bad stuff. You know.
Mm. My partner, he's the most atypical person in existence. If anything, if he can avoid tech, he would. And I remember in the early days of like ChatGPT and then Microsoft Copilot, and obviously I would go like, rah, 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 this thing does this thing and this thing. And I could see the skepticism of he was like, oh, whatever, another tech fad, like don't care, like let's talk in 6 months. But I continued to talk about it. And I realized the moment where it shifted, where he was like, and this was the exact verbiage. He said, can you ask your Copilot thing of how do I convert this measure into that measure and what I do with it? And I was like, ooh, we're breaking ice here. The moment that he's actually asking me, and I said, I can do it, but how about you give it a try? I think what is also important is we continue to share with the communities and we continue to share what works for us and also what doesn't work for us, because when we overpromise, I feel this is where we can leave others behind. And I think it's important to kind of have that responsibility of like, hey, this is not perfect,
Yeah,
but
and
here
I
what
would even
works.
say from like a responsible perspective, if people are like, hey, I'm not technical, I don't want to build anything, I'm just using it, you can still implement responsible AI as a user. And what that looks like is like you're giving the thumbs up, like, yes, this works. You're giving the thumbs down. In the beginning, like maybe the beginning of this year, I did a ton of work with just like text to image generation, or if you upload a photo of yourself, like putting yourself into whole different things. But one of the things that I noticed is there were certain tools and apps that I leveraged that anytime that I uploaded a photo of myself, it turned me into a white person or an Indian person. And I was like, I'm clearly like, I'm not even like light of like an African American, like light skinned African American. And I was like, this is not right. But like, I have to tell people. And like, I told my community, like, hey, when you see things like that, if you do nothing, delete the app, and you're just like, oh, this isn't for me, it doesn't help the developers in what they're doing. You got to say thumbs down. You got to put why this is putting me into this perspective. Like, those are the things and the feedback that all of these app developers need in order to have things built more responsibly and more inclusive.
Love that, and I love the fact that you're looking at things both from the developer
Yeah.
perspective or technology maker perspective as well as the user. And I having the user understand the part that they play and also what are the things that are under their control is so important. The other thing that I've been seeing, and it's a concept that researchers call over-reliance, when basically users are taking AI outputs and they're considering them to be absolutely correct and internalizing and reusing them. You're both shaking your heads right now because you know where I'm going with this. And the reason why that fails is because AI systems will be wrong. AI systems are
Hallucinate. Yeah.
not the experts in many cases. So it's about how you augment your own subject matter expertise, your own knowledge, and ensure that you have use of these tools that can help you, as opposed to taking the output, doubting yourself, and then having something that is completely false. I think also that, and in teaching users to how do you check, how do you validate, how do you make sure that you go through references.
Yes, Scott. There's there's a whole era of fact checking that's going to come out. I mean, do you guys remember the old school research firms, right? I just love those. Yeah, yeah. So like these people would be like, hey, I work for a research firm, and they would go and gather data, and then those sort of firms, at least where I've worked, right, like they haven't been as relevant because we have the internet, we have access, we knew how to get access to data, and we could kind of do our own fact checking. But now with AI, it's starting to get a little bit random, and I'm gonna give you my favorite analogy. Do you guys mind? Okay. So
Go for it.
okay. So do either of you play guitar?
The flute.
I don't.
Okay, cool. So one of the first songs I learned was Zombie by the Cranberries. Okay. So the easiest way to play Zombie is you start out playing an E chord, which is second fret, second string, third string, like that. Then what you do is you switch out to a G chord, which is second fret, second string, third fret, first string, third fret, last string. So you're kind of playing like that. It looks like a sketchy symbol, but I promise you I'm not doing that. And then to play a C chord, you kind of wrap your fingers around the back of the neck like that and you strum hard. So it's kind of E, G, C, E, G, C, like that. And that plays the Cranberries. Now, what's really cool is that when you put it into a strumming formation, it's like jing, 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 like that. Now, if I told you that, I've told you absolute rubbish, okay? Because that is how you play an E chord, and that is how you play a G chord, but that's not how you play a C chord. But I'm extremely confidently wrong, right? And the way I've explained it is like people are going, holy smokes, that sounds so cool. They're going to go back and be like, okay, we're going to go play the Cranberries for our friends. And they do, and their friends are like, holy smokes, dude, that is not the Cranberries. You are playing something awful. And and imagine they get on stage and do this in front of a wide audience, and they're like, you know what? My name is Chris. In front of Wembley Arena in the UK, 1.5 million people. I'm going to play the Cranberries, and it sounds absolutely terrible. And that's what AI does. And it has the ability, us as humans are lazy, we have the ability to proliferate awful information, which then retrains AI models with awful information. Right? So eventually, the standard for playing Zombie by the Cranberries could become that, depending on how widely it was shared. Okay. And that's the part that blows my mind is that in organizations, we're like, the AI will generate us something. And we're like, cool, let's just share it with everyone and put it in a public space and point everyone to that data. And actually, what ends up happening is it creates more problems. And AI is not smart. It's artificial intelligence with a small I. It's not intelligent. It's made by people with flaws. With the ones and zeros are ones and zeros, right? So fact checking for me I believe is going to become one of the most primary, one of the most important roles, and it's going to be done by people who are educated. And that's the whole red teaming concept. And I know Ioana and Altrese, you love this, but I'm kind of lining you up for this. But I feel like this whole red teaming concept to me is like got to be one of the most important things that has to happen now with regards to AI.
Note to self, never trust Chris when it comes to guitar lessons. That's the moral of this story.
Or do trust me because I'm a subject matter expert.
Let's break down red teaming and kind of just what that is. So with AI systems, and especially with generative AI systems, the way that, and it's a broader umbrella called measurement, but basically how we map and say, hey, I'm building this. What are the applicable AI risks that can occur? And examples of AI risk are things like harmful content. A system that I might be developing for K-12 might have language in there that is not appropriate for K-12. So I have to check and make sure that in terms of the language and the verbiage and other things associated with that, they're not present. There's things that are called jailbreaks, which I know are your favorite, Chris, in terms of what are things that bad actors can do in order to break your system and make it do things that it's not meant to. And there's a famous example in the AI sphere where people are asking for like Molotov cocktail recipes and things like that, and deploying different techniques in order to jailbreak. There's many. And then the actual physical thing of I want to test this system either in an antagonistic way or the benign way is red teaming, right? It's where it's a term that we have borrowed from cybersecurity, where you would have the red team versus the blue team, and they would go against each other, and they would make sure that they're showing the vulnerabilities in the system before deployment. And that's the critical term right there, before deployment. Because with a lot of the AI systems, we need to ensure that we're doing all of this before the user gets to test it and use it. Altrese, I know you've done a lot of work around operationalizing a lot of the things that have to do with responsible AI practices. Anything for the technology makers that they should consider from that perspective?
So the one thing that I say to any and every person that's thinking about how to implement responsible AI into their product development lifecycle is responsible AI should be woven into every single step of the software development lifecycle. It's not just during UAT or user acceptance testing. It needs to be done from the beginning when you have an idea where you're identifying who are your intended users, who are your unintended users. You need to understand what is the system that I'm making, what do I intend the system to make, and then also what do I unintend the system to make, because there are always going to be people that use your technology for both good and for bad. And really leaning into like my science background. So I triple majored in undergrad, and just science was always my thing. You think about the scientific method and you can translate that into technology as well. And so like you want to test to see if harmful content is going to be an output of your system if you ask it, and you can look across the different for harm classes. You want to test to see if you can jailbreak the system. You want to test to see if a cross-prompt injection attack occurs. You want to test for all of these different things, but it's very dependent on the type of system that you're making or you're developing. And so obviously, if you have something that is natural language, that a person can actually like type into like the user interface, that's where all the different harm classes are going to take place. But the biggest and most important thing is like you need to test. You need to test often. You need to have benchmarks in terms of what it is that you think is going to be a defect. Like what is a defect? What is a defect for my team? And typically if you're building, so like I can think of it from like a startup perspective, I can think of it from like a small business perspective, or I can look at it from like an enterprise, but ultimately fundamentally, like what do you guys value? What is important to you guys? Because if you don't have any values that you're going to be anchoring to, your ethics and the responsible AI outputs are going to be all over the place. You can test and then be like, well, it's a bad defect rate. I don't care. We're going to keep moving. Like you have to have that value-based approach to begin with, and then define your standards. What are what is an acceptable defect rate? Okay, how am I going to go ahead and test this? What am I going to test? Those are all of the things that you want to make sure that you're doing on the developer side when you're making it. And then also once you deploy it, you still need to be monitoring it and seeing if the model is drifting. So it doesn't just stop once you deployed it and your users are now using the system. It's also monitoring it and making sure that you have that observability.
You talked about startups and small businesses, and obviously not everybody has the resources, both from, let's say, financial perspective as well as humans perspective, to develop a whole responsible AI standard or to develop these things from the ground up. It takes a lot of research. It takes a lot of iteration. So any recommendation for somebody who, let's say, is a startup, is a small business, and they want to do the right things, but they have the question of what is a responsible AI standard? Where do I start? What are the things that I can do?
That is a good question. Starting off
Awesome.
with the values is going to be like the biggest and first thing. And of course, like I am a Microsoft employee, but then also the views and the opinions that I'm sharing are like mine. But so just as a caveat there. So starting off, you're going to have your values. What are the principles that you're anchoring to? At Microsoft specifically, we're talking about privacy, security, accountability, transparency, fairness. Those are some of the principles that we have. So once you understand this is what the principles are, then you're going to take it the next step. So, like, how am I going to implement it? You can tell somebody, oh, hey, like, you want to have your system that's transparent. But anybody in the business is not going to be able to understand that. What does that actually mean? And so then it's translating into, okay, for transparency, we want to make sure that we are having transparency notes so that way users can go in and read, understand what the system scope is, what are the system limitations. And you want to make sure that you're defining for your product teams what is a good transparency note and what is a bad transparency note. And so first you're doing the values, secondarily you're defining what's important, then you're going to be defining how they're going to do it. That way people are actually able to implement it within their day to day. That would I would say for the programmatic. And you want to do it for each of the different values and principles that you have. What is fairness to us? What are the important things within fairness? Okay, so is that going to be these specific harm categories? Fairness is one of the ones that is important. How do we go ahead and measure this? Now I'm going to help the teams go along to measure it. We have, at least at Microsoft Azure AI Foundry, where it has red teaming that you're actually able to implement it into your system if you're using it. So there are some companies that have centralized tooling that enables you to do red teaming if you don't have that specificity of it. But then it's not only just identifying those values and then explaining to the organizations like how to do it, you also want to make sure that you have a process in place. And so, hey, how are we inventorying our systems? What are the most important questions that we want to ask or the metadata that we want to collect for all of those systems? And so you're going to be defining that metadata that is important to your organization that you want to have. So those are some of the things that, and the structures that you want to put in place. And then even from a governance perspective, you want to think about, okay, hey, how often are we checking these reviews? Who are the people that are going to be checking them? How are we going to train them? Like those are some of the like fundamental components that you want to have when you're building a program. That's definitely my niche is building programs and frameworks really in any domain. Responsible AI is my passion, but you really want to have all of those fundamental things. And so if you're a program manager or if you're a project manager and you want to think about, okay, hey, you're creating a charter, like what are the things, like all of those fundamental things that you would do for any project, you do the same thing for responsible AI. It's just in that domain.
But what you said, Altrese, reminds me, one of my favorite books of all times is it's called Stealing Like an Artist. And basically it talks about in order to understand how to do things, the first easiest way to approach it is to copy. And copy from people who are the artists, who are the subject matter experts. The other bit of advice that I would add to everything you said is copy that. Don't get creative if you're just starting, right? You can even start by adopting somebody else's responsible AI standard, provided you have the same values as an organization and you resonate with them. By all means, those resources are out there in order for people to tap in and say, I'm going to get this, I'm going to replace this, I'm going to work with this. And I think it's important for people to remember you don't have to invent it from the start yourself.
And
Chris,
one last
sorry,
thing, like, there's the
jump in.
Microsoft Responsible AI standard, which is a public standard. There is the NIST framework. There is the ISO, I think it's 42001, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, 42001,
Yep,
which is also a
yep.
risk framework
It's a
for
monster.
AI. So there are a ton of frameworks that are already out there that's existing that you can leverage, build off of, and like tweak to your own organization for being able to implement that responsible AI.
Well, Trace, one thing that stuck with me as you were talking, I was thinking about it. In the organizations that I work at, right, I often have to steer people down a bit of a different route sometimes with regards to understanding that, and this you've elaborated on this already, but like this is not just about tech. This is about the Levitt-Steinman approach, like people, process, platform, and projects that you do with all of that, right? And like in Levitt-Steinman's theory, he suggests that it's not just about one thing. And often what happens is that when we work with orgs, they're like, the tech, let's make the AI. And I'm like, fine, or let's protect us from the, but I'm like, no, it is about your first line of defense is people. Okay. If you can get people onto the right mindset and say to them, you know what, like, if you can understand, okay, I'm going to give you a ridiculous example, but say you're busy typing in your browser and you go to Google and you type in a naughty website, and then all of a sudden the naughty website pops up and you're like, oh, this is obviously the Google's fault. No, it is your fault for typing in a terrible website. It's not like you have a sock puppet over your hand and you pull this thing off and it's like some malevolent being going, ah, it's my fault. It's not how it works, right? So we have to give people the shared responsibility model, right? Take responsibility for the things you're doing with the tools you have, right? Like if you walk down the road and whack somebody with your walking stick, you've turned it into a weapon, therefore you're a bad person. It's quite like going through this process of the people part, then understanding that process wraps the technology. So put in, like you said, governance. Governance is a terrible word, but put in things that can help people work in a safe space, right? And then your tech is kind of like your core. It's like, okay, well, now we have the AI, and I'm using the AI because there's literally a million versions of this, but you have the tools in place. Now that you've gone through a cultural understanding, a process, like a force field of processes, like the thing that wrapped, those ships in Star Wars, and then you have the actual technology, then you can go and build projects or use the tools to do the things you want to do. But I always think that orgs always forget that actually it is not just about tech. And this is what I love about what you all are doing at Microsoft, right? Like I revere the framework genuinely, and I present it every day of my life because when I compare it to other vendors, I do think that there's pieces missing in a lot of the other vendor frameworks that I've looked at personally that Microsoft have. And as an example, safety and security, and then at one side, and then privacy, right? So like safety and security, it's the people and the tech. It's the people and the data. Like data is a digital representation of you, your company, and your customers. So you have to respect that and you have to keep it private and protect it, and that's security. But then safety is about the person. Those six responsible AI principles I absolutely love. Like I think that if they were like the Ten Commandments of the modern day time, somebody should climb up to the Empire State Building and hold them up and be like, look what we found. Anyway, I'm rambling, but it's
I
just
love it.
it's just like a bunch of things that I had in
And the
my
one
brain.
thing that like
Sorry, I'm
really
done
stood
now.
out, and then also like tying it back to just the podcast itself, like human in the loop, like people are the center of all of
Yeah.
this. And like not only do you have to have
Yes.
a like top down approach, like your leadership, whether that be in a startup or a small business or whatever, like your leadership needs to care about responsible AI enough or more than profit. And it's a hard balance and it's a fine line that people have every single day because if you're in an enterprise, you have shareholders that you have to make happy. If you're a small business, like you guys have to run fast to like make the money before somebody else gets it, and you're trying to get VC capital funding, all of those different things. But you have to have the buy-in from the top, from the leadership saying like, hey guys, this is important, this is required. But then you also have to have that buy-in from the bottom and the people that are building, the people that are using it,
Mm-hmm.
because if there's a disjoint between the top down or the bottom up, it's not going to be successful.
No.
Totally, totally. Um, I was going to tell you something really funny. Oh, I had an argument with a company the other day, and I said to them, "Are you a tech company that just happens to make money because you're good at tech, or are you a money company that just happens to do tech?" And I'm like, "You are a money company that just happens to do tech." And I feel like you're not leading the charge with technical excellence and then making amazing cash. And there are companies out there that do that really well. I'm going to name drop one actually. There's a company called AvePoint who are really good at being a technical organization who make great money, but they lead the charge with technical excellence. And I think they're brilliant. I really do. I think that
They're
when you
fantastic.
yeah, when you look at people like TJ and Dux, they are excellent technical leaders. And they're not just a money company. But the thing that's important here is that actually, when you look at the ethos of those organizations, it's so different to a money company who just happens to do tech. Yeah. So I will stick by that, right? Like it's very much around creating that ethos, creating that culture, and again, inspiring people.
Agreed. And that kind of leads me into my next question. And I know that all of us have had this conversation before, but we think of the future a lot. And as we think of the future, for both of you, what are some of the considerations for future of work in specific? As you both have kids, as you both are working with communities, and as we're all in tech, how are you thinking of that? given there is a lot of polemic and dilemma around the future of work?
Happen here. So like one of the first things to like think about ultimately is even before the bigger like OpenAI's announcement for ChatGPT, I think it was back in 2023, the future of work was already shifting. And some of the ways that I could have noticed and observed it was when people would talk was like, hey, you don't need a degree to come into tech. You don't need a degree. Like, oh, we care about these skills. We care about those skills. And even working on like a day to day with like interns and people that are early in career, one of the things that I've observed from like early in career folks is that they are looking for things to be handed to them. Not everyone, but a lot of people are looking for like very explicit and specific. I need you to tell me to go do this, what to do it, how to do it, when to do it. And if I don't have all of those things, I'm frozen and I can't do any work. That is bad. Like we need to pivot as far away from that model as possible because now having AI, it has democratized access to all information. Now, of course, like we said previously in this podcast, like you have to be able to prompt it and you have to have some good understanding of like how to do it because it's going to spit out something. And if you don't know what it spits out, you're just going to take it at face value and you have to really understand and do your fact checking, etc. But the future of work is moving away from this is your job, this is your role, I'm staying in my lane, I'm a developer and I'm going to only develop.
Mm-hmm.
I'm a UX designer and I'm going to only do UX. I'm a program manager. I don't need to know tech. Like, stay away from me. I'm in the business. I'm in operations. Like, the future of work is shifting to where really you need to go from a specialist mindset to a generalist mindset. You need to be able to be adaptable. You need to be able to be agile. You need to build your critical thinking skills. Emotional intelligence is going to be huge because when two people are talking to one another, or you're always leveraging AI to like help in your emails and help in your writing, like how do you really connect with people? How do you really communicate with people? How can you actually empathize with something that is going on in their lives? Like those are some of the skills that are really, really critical, but the future of work is really shifting to like everybody should be able to do everything. And we're going to have agents that are going to be there that are going to be helping us do our job and making us more productive, et cetera, so forth. But we're definitely shifting from a specialist model to a generalist model, I would definitely say.
I've never heard anybody articulate it like that, but I resonate with it a lot. I think having the ability to kind of switch context, switch skills, be able to have that sort of versatility across domains is going to be very important. And it reminds me of I think it's an English expression, jack of all trades. It continues, it goes like master of none, but then it continues and says, but better than one. So that's kind of where my mind was going as you're talking through this. Chris, anything to add to that?
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. So there was this hilarious thing. Okay, it's not hilarious. So, okay, I'm going to start from the beginning. So when I saw the Frontier Firm content coming out from Microsoft, which by the way I think is epic, there's this thing that says you can buy intelligence on tap. I'm like, oh no. What does that even mean? I'm like, you can get intelligence, you can acquire intelligence as a service, intelligence as a service. I'm like, okay, whose intelligence first? Because then there's a very thin line between like so tell me who and what. But that scared me because actually what's happening is that AI is making uninformed people feel extremely informed every day with data that is not often correct. I kind of thought about that for a minute and I thought, you know what, that's actually true because I sometimes use AI and I'm like, oh man, I feel like a genius. And then I realize actually I don't know anything about the subject matter I'm reading about, right? So my worry is that you're right. I feel like people are very much more like in the moment, entitled, like we want this and we want it now, immediate gratification type. And my son is a good example. He got mad the other day because he couldn't play a four beat on the drums. And I showed him, I'm like, dude, you have to practice. It's hard. Learn. And he was mad. And I'm like, Adam, spend time practicing. It's the same as AI and development. Spend time reading and understanding your craft. But you're right, Altrese. I think that AI enables you to do a much more wide spec of things. And I think what's going to happen is that we are going to now become facilitators of artificial intelligence in the sense that we will become like agent bosses, right? We'll be facilitating interactions across these tools. So you may not be a total expert in, I don't know, the creation of awesome green glasses, but you may be an expert in the facilitation of
Yes.
the creation of those. And that's what I think is
Yes.
going to happen.
And
Um, I agree with you
And another
completely.
area that just like popped into my head while you're talking is like, yes, it democratizes access to information. And yes, a lot of people think that they're experts in fields that they're really not experts in. But there was a study, and I can't remember who put the study out, but it was in students leveraging AI. And so students that were creative and like were high achievers, they used AI with their existing skill set to do more and to be better. Whereas the students that were struggling, or not even struggling, the students that had, I would say, lazy tendencies, for lack of better words, would use AI as a crutch. And so you can use it to do a lot more, or you can use it as a crutch, and then now you've had a degradation of your critical thinking skills, you've had a degradation of your writing skills, you've had a degradation of just basic fundamental research. And so that's also a big part of just leveraging AI and how the future of work is. So it's not just using it, and it's not just using it good, but then don't use it as a crutch. Like, I there was the Amazon cloud that went out this earlier this week, and like half the internet shut down and people didn't know what to do. What happens if ChatGPT goes out? What happens if another AI tool goes out that you are so dependent on it and you're not able to just say, hey, let me critically think this through and figure it out? Like, I mean, and I might date myself. Like, I was grown up in the age of like encyclopedias and dictionaries, and my parents would be like, "Hey, go check the encyclopedia. Go to the library, check the encyclopedia. Go check the dictionary." And then you get the internet came out, and it's like, "Hey, check Wik. Like, don't just take your sources from Wikipedia. Like, you need to check it and get like a real source and all of those things." So it can be used to do so much good, but it can also be used as a crutch. And so when we think about the future of work, there is going to be a stark difference in people that use AI, a stark difference. And it's going to be, and you will
Yep.
see this
Oh.
gap that just slowly starts to widen, of the people that are using it to like pump out
Mhm.
stuff, pump out stuff, pump out stuff, but they have no critical thinking or skills outside of that tool. And you get into a room face to face with a person and they're just stuck. Or you'll have the people that,
They're
mm-hmm,
unable.
that's really one of the things that comes top to.
I'm seeing
Yeah.
it now. I'm seeing it now. I'm watching it happen. I call it the trough of disillusionment, where it's like you can achieve a result extremely quickly without knowing how to achieve it, but then the people that understand it will far surpass you. And the trough is always full of people who do not understand how they got to a point, right? So, something interesting I found. So I'm watching it, vibe coding, good example, right? So, hey, let's make a thing with the vibe coding tools, and I'm like, okay, cool, let's do that. And then that guy on Twitter, I was crying laughing at this. He's like, "Oh no, I'm under attack. I put my software out there and it got hacked." And that's what happens when you embed an API key in your code. What's actually going to happen now is that these scenarios are going to create opportunity for people who know their things. Who know we in the UK we say know your onions, right? Like, and those who know their onions will then be given opportunity to go and really know their onions. And there's actually an interesting story. I'm going to tell you it real quick. I don't know how true it is or not, so fact check me on this, and I'm not gonna. Okay, so there was a ship grounded in a certain harbor somewhere, and I'm gonna say it was somewhere in like New York. Okay, and they couldn't get this thing started. They could not get it afloat. Nothing was working. So they put out to a bunch of contractors who were charging like $500 an hour. Come and fix the thing. There were hordes of them that went in. And they could not fix this thing, and they researched and researched, and then eventually this person, let's call her Bonnie. I don't know. She rocks up and she's like, "Hey," grabs a spanner, walks downstairs, screws in tightens a nut, walks back upstairs, and she bills them for $100,000. And they're like, "But you can't do that because it's £500 an hour." She's like, "No, no, 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 no. You're paying for my brain because I'm an expert in this area. And what's going to happen is that with people who do their research, this whole concept of like in-person, extremely well thought out critical thinking, this type of knowledge that isn't on tap, that isn't as a service, that is going to be worth far more. So I'm waiting for this trough because I know that
And
what I know is going to be worth a
Mm-hmm.
lot."
and it's switching models in industry as well, right? Law is one of those where charging by the hour has been traditionally the model, and I'm seeing law firms considering like maybe charging by the hour is not the right thing to
Won't
do,
work.
and it's going to be subject matter expertise based as opposed to charging by the hour, because that's no longer the true indication of the value add that we have here. So with that, and because I know we're coming close to time, I have a question for all of us, and that question is: if you were to give one piece of homework to our audience, what is that one piece of homework?
Get your hands dirty. Go get your hands dirty. Go
Love
use the
it.
tools. Go try to build the tools. Don't have analysis paralysis. Go and get your hands dirty.
Fact check everything. Fact check everything. Don't agree with the media. Don't agree with the news every single time. It's not always right. Become an individual, have an opinion, and fact check.
Find what works for you and get really good at understanding that particular tool and what you can get from it, and then expand. Don't try everything at once because it's not going to work. Okay. And with that, our audience has homework. We're going to check in the next episode to see how good they were with the homework. But folks, that's a wrap on today's Voyage Abroad Human in the Loop. Thank you, Altrese. It was an absolute pleasure to have you on board.
Hell yeah.
And we'll...
Honored, actually. I'm such a big fan. It's so nerdy.
Yes,
It's so good to
And
have
we'll
you
be
here.
back. I promise we'll be back with more conversations about building AI that you can trust, whether you're deploying at scale or navigating it as a consumer. And until then, folks, stay curious, stay critical, and above all, stay in the
Thank you.
loop. We'll see you next time.